everyone, for another episode of the Hector and Mike Experience, Common Sense in Uncommon World. And Mike, I'd like to kind of just get started into an area that you've been working on for a long time. I know we've had this discussion, and there's been a lot of accusations back and forth. I mean, this is one of the areas that Donald Trump is in court, in Georgia about, and it's about stealing the election. This ballot stuffing. It is about rigging the elections and so forth. And what's been surprising is you've got a lot of folks that saying this thing doesn't happen. It's not really occurring out there. But now you've got two court cases, and one specifically in Connecticut where it looks like the court itself has said, "Hey, we're gonna invalidate the election because of ballot stuffing, and we're gonna have to redo the election." And like I said, I know you've been doing a couple of interviews on this. You've been speaking to groups about this. So what is going on, not just there, but I think also in Massachusetts where there's
Yeah.
another situation happening.
Off-year elections in places around the country, and what we've seen in Bridgeport, Connecticut, is actually the current mayor of Bridgeport had on video. You see some of his people in the middle of the night going to these unmanned ballot drop boxes and basically stuffing them with ballots. Ballot after ballot after ballot after ballot, and that's because in some states like Connecticut and Massachusetts and California, they allow people to carry other people's ballots and and cast their vote as quote unquote a convenience. It is probably one of the more ripe situations for ballot fraud and for voter fraud in doing that. In this particular case, it was a woman who was in the campaign of the incumbent mayor. It's important to note it wasn't an election; it was a primary. So it was two Democrats running against each other.
Hmm.
So I mean, what I've been telling people is, hey, look, if they'll eat each other in a Democrat primary, can you just imagine what they're going to do in a general election? This stuff happens. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And we have proof positive of that by the ruling of a judge in Bridgeport, Connecticut, who said that because of what he saw, because of what was testified, he's invalidating the results of the primary, and they're going to have another primary this coming Tuesday, November 7th, and then after that, then they'll have a general election. So it's thrown their calendar into chaos, but more importantly, there it is in black and white in film. Why these ballot drop boxes are such a problem, because in many places they're unmanned, unguarded, unsupervised, in places where other people can carry other people's ballots. And what happens is, you go out and you collect people's ballots. Let's talk about the Massachusetts case. The case there is you've got again a Democrat incumbent. Not to say the other side doesn't do it, but I'm just talking these two cases. Basically what they saw were people were coming by the early vote ballot drop boxes. They pour their ballots in, they come out, and they got paid for their ballots. So there's a cash incentive in some of these cases too, where they do this kind of stuff. It does prove that while people may run around and label other people election deniers, you can't deny what you see on film, and
Well,
this is
isn't
what you see on film.
couldn't this just been like you've got you with your Italian family there. You've got you, your wife, and maybe your three cousins who live there, and your five nieces, along with your mother and dad, and two other people living there, and you just turn in your ballots. I mean, isn't that in California is legal?
Right. But what happens is there are states that allow you. Here's the key. It's called the chain of custody. The more times someone touches your ballot,
Hmm.
the greater the opportunity for something nefarious to happen. It's a direct correlation. You want to have a situation where it's one ballot touched one time. So there are states around the country where they have convenience. So they say someone who's an immediate family member may cast your ballot, carry your ballot, and cast it for you. In those cases, a lot of times what the states will say is You as the carrier of that ballot also have to sign an affidavit. The person who gave you that ballot has to sign an affidavit authorizing you to have that ballot. And there's also a signature match that happens with the ballot itself and with the person carrying the ballot. So there are some safeguards to that. What you have in other places is, just anybody can carry anybody's ballot. And that's when you run into this fraud, deception, and cheating. I don't know no other way to put it. And that's why I think it's so important that we have laws that say you don't have this ballot harvesting, because those are the kinds of things that happen. And those are and you, again, we're talking about I think it was Springfield, Massachusetts,
Mhm.
and Bridgeport, Connecticut. Two places I know very well, heavily, heavily, heavily Democrat. I mean, in recent elections in Connecticut and Bridgeport, Connecticut, the Republican loses 93-7. Um, you know, so I mean, this is the kind of places we're talking about, and if it's happening there, it's not out of the question to say, if they're going to do this to themselves, what makes you think they're not going to do it to the other side? And there's examples of that kind of stuff all over the place.
Now, what did the and if you know this, it'd be great. Is what did the judge see, or what did the judge
What
rule,
he's
especially in Connecticut, or even in Massachusetts? What did they see that really raised it to that level where they said, okay, I mean, because invalidating an election and saying you've got to redo it, I
Right.
mean, that's a huge step.
Well, what they saw on video in both places. In Connecticut, there's and it's a great video. There's this woman walking into a ballot drop box like we have here in California, that is unmanned, unsupervised, open and available anytime, at some ungodly hour of the morning, and just stuffing ballots inside the box. I mean, just stuffing ballots in the box. I mean, it was literally ballot stuffing. And then there was the testimony that was given by the mayor saying, well, this person didn't do it on my behalf, even though she was on his payroll. It didn't pass the straight face test. And, you give the judge credit. He had the cojones to say, we're going to throw this out and start from scratch. In the case of Springfield, I think it was a case where, again, there was a video of people that were coming in, dropping off their ballot, and as they came out, they were handed money, and that's why they're doing the investigation there. So it's those kinds of things. That's why one of the things I say to people, especially after 2020, the most important thing on elections is transparency. People want to see the sausage made, because if they don't, they're going to assume something bad is happening. That's just the way it is. A quarter of the people in this country, just to prove the 2020 point,
Right.
a quarter of the people in this country still believe that Hillary Clinton was elected president of the United States in 2016.
Yeah.
8 years later, 25% of the people in this country believe Hillary Clinton won the election. So it's not a 2020 thing. It goes even further back in terms of the skepticism. And that's why sunshine is the best avenue on all of this stuff. Having people involved in the process is so important, so they can keep a watchful eye. I remember in 2022 there was and I was part of it, a big recruitment effort to get average people to be poll watchers. And there was the pushback from the left that said, "Oh, you're trying to intimidate people." Well, most of these people that are the poll watchers are in their 60s, 70s, whatever. I don't think they're. It's not a Seinfeld episode here. People from Del Boca Vista. I don't think these people are going to be going after anybody. But the reality is, when you have people watching, it gives you a greater sense of security of what's going on, and they know what to watch for. There's a greater sense of security, and I just think that the whole thing that this shows is that, again, it's an off-year election. This isn't even 2024. It's not a Senate race, a governor's race, a presidential race. This is a mayor's race
Yeah, but
in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
let's go into like what is this? What in your? I mean, like I said, because you've been following this to the T, and you get to testify, you get to speak on this. What does this do to the Trump case in Georgia? Does it put him in a situation where it's a little bit better? Because I mean, here you've got examples of what by invalidating an election, you're basically admitting that there was campaign fraud or there was some type of fraud with the ballot stuffing. I mean, does this make it easier for him?
I don't think it makes it easier or harder because what they're going after him on is what transpired post election in Georgia. That's what the case is there. So I don't think it has any impact there. But I'll tell you, I mean, you take a look, and let's just do this one little exercise because I did it this week. So let's take Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, another place, great cheesesteaks. Right now, if you looked at the 2023 census, there's X number of people. I'm sorry, the 2020 census. There's X number of people that are eligible to be registered to vote. So they may or may not be registered to vote, but because they're a U.S. citizen, they're over the age of 18, they're eligible to be registered to vote. Okay? So if all of those people registered to vote, then Philadelphia would have 100% voter registration. The current voter registration rate in Philadelphia today is 108%. Now you figure that out.
Yeah.
Fulton County, Georgia, 107%. Cobb County, Georgia, 104%. There are so many counties in this country where the number of people actually registered to vote in 2023 exceeds the eligible population registered to vote from the United States Census. Now, what that means is the voter rolls are not clean.
Right.
There are people that should not be on the voter rolls. The problem with that is A, how long it takes to get people off the voter rolls, and B, states like California, Nevada, New York, and others, Colorado, and I think Oregon and Washington State, to just name a few, do automatic registration, automatic voting by mail. So you don't have to apply to get a ballot. They automatically send you a ballot to their voter rolls. Now, you have 108%, there's at least 8%. The average, by the way, should be 69% of the people are registered to vote in any particular county compared to the eligibility of it. And so, you also have other places that are in the 90 percentile. It's a result of unclean voter files. That
Well,
opens the door to this fraud.
well, when you got the unclean voter files, you've got resentment, or you've got from not just not resentment, but you've got people just don't trust it. There's a lack of transparency, accountability, that people are like, okay, something's going on here, and you're right. It is a lot of cleaning the voter rolls, which you would assume that if someone ends up moving out of town, I mean, it's like someone moves, to another city, someone moves to another state, that
Right.
your DMV record is now somewhere else, that they would kind of, try to figure that out. I mean, when
It,
Uncle
it
Sam wants to come and get you for taxes or something else, I mean, they know exactly where you are.
Yes, it doesn't. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. Unfortunately, it takes a considerable amount of time to get people off of the rolls, and some places they just don't do it. I mean, in Michigan, big surprise. In Detroit, I think it's 109%.
Ooh,
I mean, there's a pattern here. There's a pattern, and again, it lacks, to the point of the show. Where is the common sense that you have more people registered to vote than are eligible? The other group it hurts, I'm going to tell you this, it hurts minorities. I mean, minorities who either came to this country and worked hard to become U.S. citizens so they could vote.
right.
Black people who had to go through all of the civil rights movements and everything else to get the right to vote. Women who had to get the right to vote. And all of a sudden, their vote is devalued. And I think that's one of the things that the mainstream media doesn't get. They keep saying, well, maybe there was cheating, but it wasn't enough to overturn the election. Well, from Providence, Rhode Island, where I've seen a few things in my life, here's my take on that. Candidates have lawyers and they're smart enough. If they know someone's going to cheat and they let him cheat and they let it get away with cheating, then that's on them.
Right.
That's their problem. The problem is it's not the question is not did it change the outcome of the election? The question is did it devalue your vote and my vote, my legal vote? And when you have someone that's not eligible who votes, someone who's not a citizen, which happens, that
Right.
votes, someone that votes more than once, which happens, that devalues our vote, and that's where the problem is. And that's where the problem. It's not with, oh, it caused this elect. You can't really tell what causes the
Right.
election to win or lose. I mean, it could have been something completely different. It's the
So,
question. The question is not the candidate; it's the voter itself.
so where does it go from here? Where are we at now? What you got Connecticut redoing the election. What happens
Right.
over in Massachusetts? What happens in
Yet to
Georgia with this case or anywhere else?
Massachusetts yet to be determined. Georgia, they have an election this coming
Tuesday.
Tuesday, the 7th. And in other places, I think it raises the awareness, and again, I think it raises the skepticism that people have. It reinforces the when you see something in video. And I remember in 2022 watching, there was Maricopa County, Arizona, which is Phoenix, and
Right.
there's an election supervisor, this guy who I'm sure would have really preferred to be out either playing shuffleboard or playing golf, announces to this long line of people in the thing, none of the machines are working. If you run your ballot through this machine, only 25% of them are going to be accurately counted. And 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 that poor guy, I watched it, but honestly, that's the kind of honesty you need. I mean, his bosses up the food chain were like, "Oh, everything's fine. We're getting it corrected. You do this, you do that." And here's this guy who doesn't know any better, who doesn't have any axe to grind, who doesn't. He's a volunteer basically. He gets paid minimum money to be a poll worker that day.
Yeah.
There he is on tape telling you the truth. Only a quarter of the times that you put your ballot into this machine, it's going to be counted. Those are the kinds of things that, right now, almost 60% of Americans don't trust the election system. And that's why. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump.
Right.
It's things like this. I mean, people know politicians say things and what have you, and like Kerry Lane. People know politicians say when they
Yeah.
see something that's tangible, that's when they react like this. That's why you have that kind of high number.
Well, let's Mike. Keep us informed as to what's happening. I guess we'll find out in
Yeah, I gotta. I mean,
Tuesday.
I've got to run because I've got three more places I've got to vote for next Tuesday. There's New
Yes.
Jersey, Maine, and Rhode Island. I still have to vote.
Well, good luck on all that voting, Mike. But yeah, let us know what's going on with it.
I'm doing a lot of exercises, in voting.
Good Lord.
By the way, you like the fact that I'm now the Speaker of the House? Mike.
Yes, I
Last
like
week it
that.
was Mike for Speaker. Now Mike is Speaker, and I got a new joint.
I like that background you're using there in
That's right.
your.
I'm gonna play the piano later.
You should, as you should. Hey, Mike, I wanted to ask you. We didn't talk about it last time, but I know that we got the president out there right now, or president's out there. You got Gavin Newsom, who's running, not running for president, um, out talking about assault weapons. You had the shooting
Lewiston,
in Maine. I think it
Lewiston,
was
Maine.
18 killed. Last name Card, who's the perpetrator in this, who they found dead.
Hmm.
Um, but what's the president out there? I mean, it just seems like it's. I know from Gavin, it's been the same thing about banning assault weapons, and I think the president even came out. Was it the president or Gavin? I remember which one, or maybe both, who went out there and started blaming Republicans for assault weapons
Hmm.
and
They both
not
did.
getting them out of the hands these types of individuals.
It's the one that stunned me really was Gavin, who came in and actually attacked the Maine legislature. Uh, and it's like, excuse me, how many people died of gun violence in L.A. this weekend? I mean, you really shouldn't be lecturing other people when you don't have your house in order. And even though you say you have the strongest gun laws in America, you still have repeat offenders with walking around with guns and shooting people up, and innocent bystanders being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I thought it was unbelievably classless of the governor to do that, to take them out to task. And the president's up there today and Friday for a memorial, which is fine. I mean, that's what presidents do. But of course, their whole answer to all of this is take away your guns. And instead of having that knee jerk reaction, if you look at the elements of this particular situation in Lewiston, Maine, you find that There are repeated examples, starting with this guy's parents, with
Yeah.
people that worked with him, the people that knew him, that flagged to the proper authorities their concern about his mental state and the fact that he had weapons and the fact that he was trained in armory.
Right.
And nobody did anything. So, it's it's tragic. It's unbelievable. I mean, I used to live in Maine. I lived in Augusta, Maine for a while. I have family that live in Maine. You know, it's just horrible. Maine's a beautiful place, great people. I mean, it's just horrible. You read the stories about the people that got shot. I mean, ordinary people out having a great time. A community, really, the essence of a community, Lewiston is.
Yeah.
And it was a horrible, terrible thing. That guy should not have had a gun. It's that simple. But taking away someone else's gun because of what he did just doesn't make to me just doesn't make sense.
Well, during the Republican debate that happened in Simi Valley, I was interviewed by Univision. I was making commentary on the debate. This was before the debate was happening, and one of the anchors asked me a question. He said, "Hey, Univision's done this polling, and in this polling, we found that the majority of Hispanics want to ban, assault weapons. What do you say about it?" And my response to it was, I said, "Look, which is true story." I said, a week and a half ago, I said, Univision did a story of this woman in East LA who was watering her front lawn, and some homeless guy or so forth came up and tried to rape her, and like in her front lawn. And if it wasn't for her neighbors, Lord knows what would have happened. I said, and I told the reporter, I said, I want her armed. I want her armed. I don't want the other guy, the perpetrator, armed. And I said, and here's the thing is, especially for like Gavin Newsom, who's going out there and deciding he's going to try to lecture, other places. And oddly enough, I mean, he's trying to lecture, Maine and so forth. They're all Democratic legislators.
Right.
There isn't a
They're,
Republican there. They're all
they're
Democrat.
very liberal, by the way.
Yeah,
They've got a Democrat governor. And, yeah.
yeah. But here's the other thing too. In California, we have this program called the APPS program, where if an individual is deemed to be mentally incompetent or too violent, and the court has deemed that, then there is a program that is paid for by through the Department of Justice, which we pay with our tax money, where they go out there and they try to find the individual to try to remove the firearms, so they know who it is, they know where they live, and they know what firearms they have, and so they're tasked with trying to go out there and remove them. And under Kamala Harris, when she was the district attorney in California, she came to the legislature and asked for money, and the Republicans and the Democrats got together and said, okay, you said it's going to take this much money to get rid of it in 5 years. What is it going to take for the list to go down to zero in 3 years? And they gave her the money.
Hmm.
Now, what they did with the money, I don't know, but the list only grew. And
Yeah.
then Javier Becerra became the district attorney.
AG. Yeah.
And once again, it just grew, the list continued to grow. Now, under Bonta and under Gavin Newsom, that list is continuing to grow. And I want to say it's about 16,000 people. And these are people, they know who they are, they know where they live, and they know what firearms they have. And it's like, look, before we start lecturing any other group of individuals, go after those. Go after your lowest hanging fruit, because here you have a list of people that the court's already deemed to be too violent or not mentally competent to have a
Right.
firearm.
Right. Eh, what more do you need? I mean, it's just the part I don't get. And so their answer is to take everybody's guns away from them,
Well,
or
I think it's
restrict this or
headlines. I think
restrict.
it's just headlines. That's all it is. I
Oh, it
think it's just
is.
headlines.
It's
It's
exactly what it is.
I can
Because
go.
nobody looks at the story the day after that. What I just said about the fact that it's now come out that the guy's parents notified the authority, that there was his supervisors at his work and at the base that notified authorities, that other people notified authorities. That's
Right.
all day 5, 6, and 7 stories. It's not day 1 and 2, which are the headline grabbing stories because of the enormity of the tragedy. And that's where you get, and that's why I just think it's disgusting when you get outside politicians come in and try and lecture people, when their house is so, disorganized, like you said. I mean, I told you I served on a grand jury for a while. I
Yeah.
mean, I could tell you there wasn't one time that we got something with someone that had a weapons violation that didn't have a repeat offense on weapons
Right.
violation.
Right.
So, you've got a list of those people. When that list is zero, then maybe you can open your mouth and lecture other people. But until it is, that's 16,000 people that we know in California that are armed and shouldn't be. Why we don't go get those people is beyond me. I mean, and until you do, keep your mouth shut.
Well, and the other thing too is, I mean, make it so crazy where the penalty for doing something like that is going to make you want to think twice. I mean, but we don't. I mean, right now we
No.
have, we have a theft of, if it's under $950 and it's considered a misdemeanor, that includes a firearm.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got a firearm and you steal a firearm and it's, let's say, worth $400 or $500, that's still a misdemeanor because we have a threshold of $950. And so, there is the headline grabbing, lecturing and finger pointing you can do. But then again, I mean, the biggest thing is look at the reality of what you're dealing with. And rather than kind of focus yourself, and this is for all politicians, rather than focus yourself on trying to grab the headlines, actually try to build some good policy. I think you'll go a lot further if you do that, and you'll get more respect from individuals than what you see right now. Because at the end of the day, it's just that finger pointing, which it serves no one and it does no good, especially on a tragedy that happened in Maine, tragedies that have happened in other places, and we're just trying to just collect more headlines than anything else.
So, someone said to me, who is um, I would call a gun control advocate, um, who is near and dear to my heart, he said to me, he said, "This will change everything. What happened in Lewiston?" And I said, "No, it won't, because if you go to people and ask them where was the shooting in Texas, where was the shooting in Connecticut." People, unfortunately and sadly, people forget once time, the shooting in Orlando that took place. People forget that stuff.
Right.
It's incumbent on people like Gavin Newsom and company to do exactly what you said. Stop demonizing people who went through extensive training,
Right.
extensive testing to be able to, an extensive background to be able to have a gun in this country. Stop going after those people. Stop lecturing people in other states about what they should and should not do when your state has murders every day of the week, and especially on weekends. They're neck and neck with Chicago when it comes to violence on weekends.
Right.
It's just it just is the kind of thing that I think rips this society apart, and it's just a matter of time before we see it happen again. I guess maybe with 16,000 people out there that have guns that shouldn't have guns in the state of California, maybe it's surprising it hasn't happened more frequently here. But
Well,
I will tell you that probably a lot of the shootings that you hear about in LA and San Francisco and wherever, they're probably not done by people who legitimately own those guns.
yeah, you're right. And the thing is too is like, the other thing I'm seeing around is how much, I don't know, it's just anti, I don't know, it's an anti movement on things, right? I mean, it's crazy what's happening in our universities right now. What's happening, especially with what's happening with Israel and Hamas. The attacks on Israel, and now, I mean, how this is spilling out into not just our streets but also our college campuses. With all this back and forth hatred that is going on. There's that Cantor's restaurant over in Southern California that just got
Mm-hmm.
vandalized, and
Oh, did it really?
yeah, it's got vandalized, and so they're going to investigate it, and they're going to question. They're going to see if they charge it as a hate crime. But and the thing is like what is going on in UCLA? What is going on in Harvard,
Right.
and what's going on everywhere else? Good lord!
I think what you're seeing, well, first of all, on Cantor's, I mean, that's, I saw a hate crime once there. I was having a pastrami sandwich and somebody put mayonnaise on their pastrami. I was like, you got to be kidding me. That's a hate crime, man.
Yeah,
Uh, but, that's a great place. I love that place. Um, but I think what you're seeing on the campus is a reflection of what's being taught on the campus. It's that it really is, that's what is happening on a lot of college campuses today, and you see the what's happening, and my solution, the Valenti solution, which you can tell is going to be really common sense. If these kids want to go out and protest on behalf of the Palestinians and Hamas, great. I'm happy to buy a one-way ticket for them so they can go live under their rule. Have a great time. Send me a postcard. Let me know how it goes. Especially if you're a woman. Let me know how it goes on your educational front, on your job
Summer
front,
program.
on
Let's set up
getting
a
married
summer.
to a bunch of, someone you don't even know.
Let's set up a
Having to,
summer program, Mike.
I
We need
mean,
to sponsor
you
a
know,
summer program. You know.
yeah. I mean, and what do they have? The students that come over, a student abroad.
Yeah,
Well,
summer. Yeah,
we'll
summer
send you
abroad program. Yeah.
send you to the the PLO, or we'll send you to Hamas, and for the summer, and come back and tell us how much you like what you're being taught in school, that you're actually believing. I
Oh,
mean,
my
remember,
my favorite is the Queers for Palestine. It's
there you
like,
go.
should someone tell them?
Yeah,
Who's gonna tell them? You know.
yeah. Who's going to tell them that they go over there? They're going to be beheaded.
Well, they got two choices. They either get castrated or get killed. So
Well,
those are
that's
those are
so
choices right
they
there.
be so you get beheaded.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just they live in a fantasy land. They live
But
in a
there's
fantasy land.
there's this all this lack of look. You've got to go. You've got a right to go out and protest. You've got a right to go out and state your point of view, right? And the thing is, it's and I heard it once, and it was in an interview, and it just always stuck with me. There was some college student debating, and they were having getting an argument with someone who was served who had served in the military, and the individual's like, "Be glad that you have people like me to defend your right to your opinion." And that always really struck me, and he was right. It's we have certain freedoms in this country, and we have freedoms to dissent, dissent against our government, dissent against individuals at different points of view. We have the right to go out and protest, stand in a corner, hold our sign for whatever we're for. But at the same time, we should be able to grant the other group that same right, because that's what these rights are there for, to protect those rights. But it seems as though it's becoming more and more of, you know I'm you can only protest as long as I agree with what you're saying.
Right, exactly.
and and
You
and
have
as
every
long
right
as,
to say what you have to say as long as it agrees with what I'm saying.
yeah, and if I
Yeah.
disagree with it, then I could use violence, I could push you, I can hit you, I
Right.
can vandalize things because I don't agree with it, and because I'm the enlightened one and you are not, then I
Right.
could, deface your property, or I could, call you racist, or Lord knows, what other things. It's crazy.
Right. I'm entitled. I'm entitled. You're not. I'm one of the chosen elite. You are not.
So
And
what?
what I
So
say holds more weight than what you say.
yeah, so I'm actually finding it kind of comical now that that other side is now feeling the brunt of the stuff that they
Mm-hmm.
do. I mean, you've got these. I mean, I don't know. It's like, know your audience, people. It's like, if you're in some of these elite law schools, do you honestly think the law firms are going to want to have you in there? And you got that letter that was signed by all these major law firms saying to Harvard's like, what the hell are you teaching there? First of all,
Mm-hmm.
second of all, we're not going to take some of these students, and they've already rescinded some of those offers to some of these students. And I think it's one of those things. It's just, with social media, with everything out there, with video, people will know who you are, and think twice, especially if you're going into this profession and you want to get hired by one of these big law firms.
It's the consequence of your freedom. I mean, free. That's what it is. You have the freedom to say anything you want to say. You have the freedom to say it anywhere, reasonably that you want to say it. They take it a step further in saying that they have a right to say it, other people don't. Um, but even if they take it to that step, here's the bottom line. They have to learn. They don't learn this in college. This is learned in real life. There are consequences to what you do and what you say. Actually, to be honest with you, and you know this as well as I do, that comes from your parents.
Yeah, yeah.
That doesn't come from the school. That doesn't come from anybody else. That comes from your parents. What you say and what you do will have an impact on your life. And now they're learning this fact, some of these people who are thinking they're going to go to some fancy law firm or something like that, because the law firm is rescinding orders, because employers are looking at that kind of activity to see if they should hire someone or not hire someone. You've got a right to say whatever you want to say, but you also have to understand by doing that, there could be consequences to it. And you have to weigh what's more important, me running around on a college campus, supporting a group that beheads babies, or me keeping my mouth shut
Right.
and making sure I get into a good law firm. They're making a decision. They have to understand, and now they're learning it. They should have learned it at home, but now they're learning there are consequences to what you say and what you do.
Actions have consequences. That's what my mom used to always tell us.
Mm-hmm.
Actions have
Yep.
consequences. And something I tell my girls, I mean, and it's, and it's interesting because you're right. It is this society right now, and going back to Gavin Newsom and his whole, headline grabbing. I mean, he spent this whole summer, or earlier the year, going out there and just, like, for example, and this is another example, just beating up on oil companies. They're price gouging.
Mm-hmm.
They're out there, manipulating the market. They're out there, and what do you call them? Greedy big oil. Well, his own administration this past week released, because it's now mandated through the state of California. There was legislation that was passed that mandates that these oil refineries indicate how much profit they're making.
Mm-hmm.
And so the number comes out, and it's interesting because the refineries, the government put it together and published a number, and it's 14 cents per gallon of gasoline. So they're making a profit. The oil companies are 14 cents per gallon of gasoline. Well, when you look at the other numbers, the federal government's making 18 cents per gallon of gasoline.
And
Then
what's
you look at
California making?
California is making 100, no, I'm sorry, $1.08 per gallon of gasoline. So the government by itself is making $1.26 per gallon of gasoline in their profit, while the oil companies are making 14 cents, and yet you haven't heard anything from Gavin on this stuff.
No,
He,
you won't.
he's been
But what?
silent. He's now talking about homelessness and his bond measure for homelessness, or also talking about Maine. I mean, it's like, okay, you made this big deal, price gouging, greedy oil companies. Where the hell are your numbers?
Right.
And it's, I mean,
Well,
it's
by doing the finger pointing, it deflects away. But those numbers are incredible, and those numbers should people should be made aware of those numbers. The media should make people aware of the fact. But of course, with Gavin, it's like with Gavin, there's always got to be an us versus them thing.
right,
That's the part about all, and I'm gonna put my Republican hat on for a second. That's the part of the Democrats that drives me up the wall. After 2020, it's like we got to have unity. We all got to get along. We all got to be respectful. We all got to do bop 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 beep, kiss and hug and everything else. And yet, and yet, they are nothing but divisive. It's
right,
bad that you have to pay more money for your gallon of gas when in fact the company is making the people who make, distribute, and deliver are making
right.
14 cents, and you are doing nothing but sitting there and you're making $1.08. I mean, but it's easier to blame them because in everything people do, they don't have the time to focus on that, and the press does a lousy job of holding people's feet to the fire about facts and figures like that. It's
And that they do,
unfortunate.
Mike. That they do. So it's bananas. But Mike, it was good to get together with you on speaking on this stuff, and so let's get together soon.
All right. And prayers out to the people in Lewiston, Maine. Great, great, great place.